Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. It's me, Tigre Gardenia. I am so excited about this. So this whole conversation that we're about to listen to together, that experience together, was something that I have been looking for from the perspective of what Stephanie Jackson does with her practical sanctuary is, I cannot emphasize enough, so important. The idea of creating a sacred space and like really thinking about your interior design as a way to support your relationship with other kin, to support your nervous system, to support the way that your mind works. For all of us that are multi-passionate and, quirky, as we were calling it in this conversation, neurodivergent, all those things, having a space that truly reflects who you are and that encourages your way of being is so important. So please listen to this conversation, reach out to us. Let's have a conversation about it, because I think that developing both work as well as personal spaces and designing them as sanctuaries is the next level in our evolution. That is just so important. No more cookie cutter, man. Dang the cookie cutter. We need spaces that truly help us be the maximum, most authentic selves we could possibly be. So with that, I am so excited to share with you episode 109. I still can't believe that. 109, Designing Your Practical Sanctuary with Stephanie Jackson. Welcome to Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. I'm your host, Tigre Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor, certified life coach, and the founder of the Naturally Conscious community. For over a decade, I've been known as a world ambassador for plant advocacy, working closely with plants to share their practical wisdom to help you consciously embody the elements of life that nourish your evolution. In this podcast, I delve into ancient and modern knowledge from biology to spirituality about the wondrous ways of plants. Together, we'll explore how ecosystem thinking helps you overcome limiting beliefs, understand the true nature of relationships, and live an authentic, impactful life. Hello, Stephanie. I have been waiting. I have to say, I have in my mind a little list of like types of roles and people that I want to talk to. And when we've had our conversation, I was so excited because this is an actual passion area for me. But before I'm going to jump into exactly what that means, can you please tell everybody, who is Stephanie Jackson?
I am the owner and founder of Practical Sanctuary Sensory Interior Design. As far as I know, my company is the only company in the world that is doing what I'm doing right now, which is creating spaces that tune to the nervous systems of the people that live and work there. What I mean by that is I create spaces for highly sensitive people, for neurodivergent families, for healthcare, for trauma care, and I pay attention to all of the sensory aspects of the space in terms of how those aspects are affecting the people who live there from all sensory and emotional and relational perspectives. That means I am paying attention to acoustics, how much acoustic chaos there is, and how the people who live in that space deal with noise, how they can track or not track conversations, how they can focus. Lighting, people who are highly sensitive to different types of lighting. I will do things to mitigate or change the lighting so people can be comfortable. Relationships, how we set boundaries in our homes. When you're dealing with neurodivergent families, sometimes you have parents with a really different tolerance level for noise, chaos, movement than the children. And you have to set physical boundaries, which allow for those behavioral boundaries to work for everyone. So it's a multidimensional puzzle with every family, with every space, which I love doing. And my mission is to get these concepts into the design phase of every building that is renovated or developed in the future, particularly with healthcare, government, business, education, because our spaces are draining many of us, and they don't have to. They can support us. So that's my mission in a nutshell. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
So I'm gonna tell you now because I love everything, every single piece that you mentioned, especially because my original foray when I first started working with plants and I started to have my plant reawakening, I looked around and I said, okay, what direction do I want to take? Because at the time, this was gosh, like 13, 14 years ago, there wasn't a lot of discussion. There was biomimicry, which was kind of my first entry points. Like I walked through the whole idea of design inspired by nature, the idea of looking at how different organisms, different beings, how different plants or animals, or even human body parts work in certain areas, and then what does that look like? And I always migrated towards the idea of social innovation, right? The way, how is it that these design elements affect our social interactions, or we can design social interactions by there? And that naturally took me into the direction of biophilic design, which attempts to do my words, not yours, what I'm about to say, they're my interpretation of the way, being somebody who worked in biophilic design and who still works in biophilic design, is a somewhat not stale, neutral way of doing what you do, in the sense that I think biophilic design is a great first step, but I feel like what you're doing and what I loved about the conversation you and I had when, as we were prepping for this, was that I think you take it into the realm that is so important today, which is personalizing it beyond just the checklist that a biophilic design can do. If you could help just to make sure everybody, all of us, are on the same page, do you know anything about biophilic design? And like, can you share a little bit with people kind of like the differences, the way you see them? Because I have my own opinions about how you see the difference between what you do and like tradition, what's become now traditional, which is still cutting edge and still awesome that it happens, but what you see as traditional biophilic design.
Yes, I think it's that neutrality that you
Mhm.
pointed out. That it's like, yes, you can choose to do biophilic design or not. And it's a preference. It's nice. It has some benefits, but it's like a boutique kind of thing.
Right.
It's like, okay, it's for people with money. I've been a member of Longwood Gardens for years, and there's this wonderful wall that's like all the plants are growing out of the wall, and you see it all over the place, and it's almost like a design trend, like any other
Right.
trend. It's sort of morally neutral.
Yeah.
For me, this is not neutral. It is it's a mission to bring our environments in tune with our nature.
Right.
And so biophilic design is a necessary element of that, not a aesthetic choice. Now there are many people who simply don't have the interest or the cognitive capacity to care for plants in their environment. But I don't think the existence of plants in our environment and integrated with our building is ultimately going to be optional.
Right.
I think we treat it as though it is optional. So I integrate as much biophilia into my designs as I possibly can. And it needs to be an integrative process.
Right.
I need to have landscape designers, sustainability designers, healthcare workers, that scientists that understand, ecosystems. They have to be part of the process.
Right.
So yeah, that's where I see That's where I come down with
Yeah,
biophilic.
and I think that that's a great thing. I mean, and for those that are listening that might not really understand, so biophilic design in essence is kind of like, how do I turn whatever I'm designing to have as much natural input as possible? So the idea of lighting that mimics the cycles of nature, that might have a dappled or a sort of like instead of straight light like we would have with a lamp, whenever you have light coming through trees or anything, it's going to have different shading to it. It's going to have movement to it. It's having more rounded edges, because in nature we have more rounded edges. We don't really have a lot of sharp edges. There's all kinds, there's an entire checklist that
Mhm.
exists now, you know, water elements, and how do you have things that you can, that mimic even temperature of nature. All these types of elements that make you feel kind of like you're outside, which is great. I mean, like
Mhm.
you were saying, it is great. But I do agree with you that I think that it is for some people, especially in the business world, kind of like the end goal, when in reality, I think, like you said, it should be the beginning. Like, I start with a biophilic environment, with an environment that I've created that allows elements as if I'm in nature. Then I look at who are the people that are going to be using that.
Mhm.
And I add a layer on top of that, which is, given what those people, who those people are and what those people will be doing, what is it that I need to add to the environment to create a relationship between the environment and the health of that person? Just like any animal in nature, or will, and even every plant in nature will personalize their space so that it's most adaptive to what it is that they need, right? You're not going to have a beaver that, just because you're outdoors, you're going to have in the tundra, right? A beaver is going to want water, but a beaver is also going to create their own den. They're going to be able to move those in certain positions to best shape how big or how small the beavers are. Like, you're always going to have the plants and the animals adapting their environment to what's best for them. We've always done this with like decoration, but I think what you do is really important, because it says to a space, whether it's your home or your business, I'm an individual person. I have characteristics that are natural for my work. Like, if I work on Wall Street, I know it's high stress, it's very fast paced, it has all these types of things. If instead I'm talking about my personal study at home, I might want an environment that's very conducive to, you know, my nervous system being able to take in lots amount of input, to be able to, you know, study, or to be able to do calculations or strategy, depending on how I want to use it. And I like the idea of being able to create an environment that supports, you know, whatever it is that I need that space, whatever I'm going to be using that space for. And that's where I think biophilic design or any of the design elements don't really go that far. And I really like that that's the direction that it takes you. How did you end up kind of deciding to go in this direction?
It picked me. I
As
had
always.
no intention of doing this. And when I look back, I see how I'm a pretty, I wouldn't say, I don't like the word stubborn, but
I'm stubborn. I've
I,
got three pairs
I'm
of horn in my astrology, and I am
okay,
so
great.
freaking stubborn. It's ridiculous. Like, heads down, horns out. I am just going to go.
I consider myself to be open. I'm open to taking things in, I'm open to other people's perspectives, but I also have an internal compass, which is very decided. Like, and it surprises people because I am so open. I mean, I'm interested in knowing what people are about, and I'm interested in helping and supporting them. And so people think I'm very easygoing, and then they hit something that's important to me, and they find out that I am not the malleable person they assumed I was because of the openness. So I started out as a fine artist with the absolute commitment that is like, I will live out of dumpsters. I will do what I have to do to be and to make art for the rest of my life. And that was a very, very conscious, firm decision at a very early age, which I followed through on at times when my peers who were with me in the beginning are like, "Oh, this is too hard. I'm going to go to medical school. I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to get an MBA. Like, I'm out."
Right.
I'm just like, dude, it's like, no, this was for life. So, and I did that for 20 years. I founded a couple of alternative art spaces. I did the sojourn in Mexico to paint full time thing. I did the move to New York and found a movement thing. I did art blogs when I wasn't getting the traction I wanted. So I was like, okay, I'll make it. I will create the thing. And the art world took me down. The art world and the economy. I'm Gen X. I graduated into multiple recessions. I've seen booms and busts a lot, but the 2008 bust took me out because I had my daughter right as I was pregnant, as the economy was collapsing.
Mm,
Her father was in the financial industry. The jobs and money just evaporated overnight. Just, he had a contract, just poof, gone. So by the time she was 9 months old, I was living off my credit card in New York. And, that it was like, no, the art world is not taking care of me. And really never had. It was, I had gotten behind the scenes enough that I could see how basically bankrupt it was of any values that I wanted to espouse. It's essentially a money laundering scheme for people who got their money through means that artists are in the street protesting about, right?
right.
So I couldn't get where I was needing to go with the art as I had always assumed I would. And in the meantime, I had gotten completely caught up in healing, like helping people heal. That was how I was keeping my lights on, was a licensed massage therapist. And I used the massage therapy as like, okay, let's pay the bill. So you always get a client on the table, get your rent paid, and then you're good. You paint, you blog. But I had a family to support at this point, and there were no jobs. And my now ex was not helping. So I had to get serious about learning business skills. So that's what I did. I made my massage business into a real business. I started learning marketing, branding, and all of those things. And a very short time into it, one of my clients said, Stephanie, I just love that painting in your studio, and I just love how your space is set up. Would you do that in my house? And I was like, no, I'm sorry, I don't make art anymore. And she said, I'll write you a check for a deposit. And I said, I do that. Yes. Yes.
Sure.
And it was transformative because I really loved this client, first of all. And I knew her very well, and she had a vision that she knew what she wanted, but she did not know how to do it. And I went into her space. She wanted a mural on her staircase risers that looked like water. And I was like, I can do that, sure. But she had the vision. She picked the colors. Her space was it had certain ceiling height, certain window height, it's in Philadelphia, so the light is a certain way. And I'm hyper aware of all of those things because I've been studying light and color for decades. And I've lived in a lot of different environments. And I'm like, okay, this is going to work. This is not going to work. This is going to work. This is not going to work. And the process of being in her space with her and talking with her and playing music and telling stories and going through the process of creating this mural that worked with the space, I'm like, this is what I was born to do. So many more elements than just creating this object that you stick on the wall and try to sell to someone.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, well, now I know business skills. So I'll funnel my business skills into creating a business that does this. And soon on the heels of that, I realized that I had another superpower, which is I love quirky people. I've always befriended the oddest person in the room at any point.
I love that now that the world, has this kind of a love affair with the word neurodivergent, and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
dude, we've been calling these the mad genius, the quirky,
Exactly. Uh-huh.
the weird. Like we call ourselves
Uh-huh.
inside of my naturally conscious community, we call ourselves weird and woo.
Mhm.
But like I just got a message from my friend. I have a friend of mine that goes running every morning, and I've known him since high school, and he leaves me these like 20-minute messages while he's running every morning. And it's because it's his way of like just moving through everything in his brain, everything that he's
Mhm.
thinking, which is sure quirky. Let's call it quirky. But it's
Mhm.
those mad geniuses that are like, of course, the neurodivergent people, we've known all of them our whole lives.
Right. Yes. I mean, way before I knew the word neurodivergent, these were my friends.
Yeah.
I have a friend that I've known since we were 7 years old that does that. I'll get the text message. It's this long. It's about some random thing. I'm like, yay.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the other piece, and I'm interrupting your story, but only because it feels like
Absolutely.
it's appropriate. What I love is that I think because of that, because we've always known these people, because we've always been these people, we
Mhm.
also know the things that they need, right? Things
Yes.
like these are people
Yes.
that are highly amazing, and like you said, the 20-minute voice message or the
Mhm.
super long text, and then they disappear for 3 days into a cave in their houses. And it's because like their minds are so huge and moving all over these things, and then it collapses in and of itself. And then
Mhm.
the house needs to
Mhm.
be both entertainment space for everything that
Mhm.
they do, like they're usually
Mhm.
musicians or creatives of some sort,
Mhm.
and then it also has to have the safe, protective, I am recharging type of, the whole highly sensitive thing
Yes.
that a lot of people I
Yes.
think still don't recognize is
Oh,
such an
yes.
important set of characteristics.
Mhm.
Access to nature inside the house,
Mhm.
recharge my battery. Okay, I'm done. Now I can be,
Yes.
outgoing again.
Well, you just described the next part of this process was realizing that I know what these people need,
Hmm.
and that really everyone needs these things. It's way more obvious with neurodivergent people.
Absolutely.
Neuro I mean it's so polarized with neurodivergent people. They have superpowers, and then they have outsized needs that if they don't get met, it's collapse. It's catastrophic.
Hmm.
So it's urgent with the neurodivergent population, and becoming more so because as we all can find one another through the internet,
Hmm.
and this is genetic, people who maybe didn't find anyone to partner with and did not have children all of history are now finding each other on the internet, having kids, and their kids are even more far along on the spectrum than
Yep.
they are. And it's seen as this like epidemic, this crisis. What's causing this? I mean, for me, it's like it's fairly obvious that it's hugely genetic. I mean, I'm sure there are some environmental factors, but I don't consider neurodivergence to be a disability.
Agreed.
I consider it to be a difference, and it's a difference that's always been there, but because we're getting better diagnostic skills and we are just more attuned. There were so many neurodivergent people that were just abused and told they were
Ignored.
crazy and ignored, that we're now grappling with this. We're in the
Yeah.
schools, parenting, and I'm like, I know what's needed, and moreover, I have executive function, which, as I know from founding two different art spaces, many, if not most, highly quirky people do not have.
Correct.
So I felt like I had all of these skills that I had been developing for all of these years, which I thought were about, becoming an artist, building a business, etc. And I'm like, there's a huge gap in systems that's shaped like all the skills I've been developing for all of these years.
Right.
And I didn't want to be a business owner. I mean, I just wanted to be alone and create things. But the economics gave me very little other option. And and then I found the mission. So it's the creativity, it's the economics, it's the mission, and the need. So here I am. I
And
mean, yeah.
I absolutely love this because I feel like another element that's happening is as more and more people feel are evolving out of their conditioning. In other words, as we're embracing much more of who we truly are. Like you said, we've had always the quirky people. All of us have our quirks and our parts, but many of us have been kind of forced into a rigid system
Mm,
that promoted form over function. In other words, the idea that you had to, like, there was this process of, this is how you do things, this is how you work, this is how you do, you have to wake up early and you have to go and do this and you have to do that, and your homes need to have this cookie cutter shape in order, and your businesses have to have these cookie cutter shapes. Like, I remember when I was working at Microsoft. So Microsoft, at the time that I was working there, had a philosophy which was like, everybody should have an office. And I thought it was brilliant because I had come from a different company that everybody had cubicles. And the cubicle for an extremely creative person sucks big time because you're normally highly sensitive, which means noise, distractions, environments. The idea that I can't close my door at any point, that I can't personalize my space enough, that I
yeah.
can't block other people out of it. Like, I remember Intel at the time had a completely different philosophy, which was everybody had a cubicle, where Microsoft was everybody had an office. And I remember every time I would have to go to Intel for something, for, some work related thing, I was walking around there going, I would not survive here, because without that office, without the ability for me to close the door and sometimes even just sleep on the floor with my pillow and my blanket because I needed
Mhm.
that half an hour nap,
Yeah.
or all of my toys that were in there that made that space mine and me, and my ability to, like, not freak out in a good way, like I was working on a problem and being able to, like, use my whiteboards and just move around and use my body and all these different aspects because I was behind a closed door. And I feel
Yeah.
like that was really conducive at the time for a lot of creativity to come out. And I think that that's the interesting thing about what's happening today, is that as more and more of us sort of unshackle ourselves from these, of course, we have to have common traits in order to interact, but in our own spaces, whatever those spaces might be, unshackle ourselves from many of these kind of constraints and these conditionings that have been placed on us. I do think people, the work that you're doing, like you said, is mission, because now I have to make a space really work for me, especially if I can do it at the early stages. Like, the friends of mine that I've had that have had the privilege of being able to design their own homes, like from
Mhm.
beginning to
Mhm.
end, has been amazing to see what they do,
Yes.
because the spaces already, physically speaking, and then we'll get more into kind of like what you do in order to create a space for a person that is highly sensitive, for example. But I loved every time I go into their houses seeing what they've created. Like, I had one of my friends created, he had a secret door that was hidden behind a hologram. He had like a
Oh,
holographic image, and it led to his theater, which he had created because he needed. And so there's this really bright space with this gorgeous, like, holographic image on the wall that when you stood in a certain way, you realized was a door. And then when you come through the door, you have this super cave like dark space that was his theater, with like really comfortable sort of lazy boy super chairs and a full screen theater. And it was like, for him, the contrast of, this is the environment of openness and sharing and, entertaining and all these types of things. And this is the space that I go to retreat. And this is a person who, has really done amazing things in, he was somebody really high up in Microsoft. He's done some really amazing, incredible, creative innovations. And now I understand, like, looking at his house, I was like, oh, I get it. Like, of course, the only way for you to create all of this is to have that other piece. And then he was telling me about what he was doing to the, because when I went there to his house, he was telling me what he was going to be doing to the landscaping. And he was basically turning it into a woodland area with a massive redwood in front of it, with in front of the house. And he was turning into this woodland because, again, highly sensitive people need that connection to nature. Like
Yes.
that connection to nature is a reset. It's like a, oh, other beings
Mhm.
that I can understand me, that don't stress me out, that like, regulate me and help me kind of find
Mhm.
clarity. And so he needed all of these different kinds, and his family in general, like his the whole family needed all these different spaces that allowed for these different environments and these different
Yes.
ways of processing information.
Exactly. Yes. He is doing with his own house what I do for other people.
I love it. I love it.
Yes.
So tell me more. Tell me like some of the things that you've done, and like what are some of the experiences and that people have come to you saying, "Hey, I need help with this," and that you've been able to craft in their space.
Yes. Well, one of the first people that hired me was a massage client of mine who had a catastrophic stroke uh, due to eclampsia during childbirth. And I got a frantic call from her friend who that her friend had almost died giving birth and was the child was okay, but her friend was paralyzed on half of her body. And modern healthcare tends to give up on stroke victims quite early on. There's a myth that says that people can only get certain amount of function back within a certain window, 3 to 6 months, and if you don't get any more function back, we're just, we're going to warehouse you. So I started massaging her regularly, and we got to be friends. I mean, and it was a really distressing situation, but there was enough money in the household and family and relatives that she had a lot of help. So ultimately, after a few years, her family moved into a house in the suburbs with and they had physical therapists coming in regularly. Like they had to they hire, and they had a live-in physical therapist and a live-in caregiver. And the daughter was growing up, and my friend was, you know, trying to learn to walk again. There's considerable like issues with her memory, and then she could only use her right half of her body. The left half was just not moving around. And I was with her long enough that when I would go to see her, like, she's in New Jersey, which is called the Garden State, but she's trapped in her house, and her family they were used to taking care of her, so they were kind of treating her a little bit like a piece of furniture.
Right.
Like I walked into the bedroom, and I mean she's capable of using her right hand, but the bedroom is set up so that on her side of the bed, it's her left hand that is accessing the bedside table with her phone, her iPad, the light. She's got to get someone else to hand her the phone, the iPad, and turn on the light when she's got a perfectly good right hand here, but she can't get to it. So I said, look, I'm starting this new business. uh, let's go.
Yeah.
And I ended up designing her physical therapy treatment room. And I did this huge mural. Like, I was still like doing the art thing, so I did this huge mural that was a lotus, and it was her favorite colors. And I, just designed a flow path so that she could use the capacity that she had to the greatest extent. And it went from, essentially, like, physical therapy spaces they're triggering to the nervous system, to say believe. They look very much like torture chambers.
Yep.
That's not good for your healing pathways in your nervous system. So instead, her physical therapy room, you walk in, and it was like a lotus, like a sun rising, and it was like a garden and a playroom that she could do all the things in. She could watch a movie, she could play a game, she could do her physical therapy, like a little workout, she could be on her desktop. So it was this joyful sanctuary for healing rather than a torture chamber that she's just got to work hard to get a little bit back of what she's lost. And that kind of informed the trajectory of what I do.
I love that. I love that. And I think that that is, again, it's so important for us to have that, to have those spaces that really modify the way we're doing things. I remember I was working on a design once, when I was doing more biomimicry projects, and this design, it was really a prototype, but it was the idea of creating a rolling garden, a rolling grass inside of an office space, so that people could have. And this was like one of the projects that I don't remember if it was, what are their names right now? Oh, it'll come to me. It just blanked for, I can see the company, but I cannot name it for a second. It'll come back to me. But
Yeah.
they actually implemented this, which was kind of this rolling grass space inside of the building, which turned out to be kind of a hangout break room type, so that you were inside of the building, but for your break, you could be sitting on the lawn as if you were outside, to kind of stimulate again that, if they were in the middle of the city and they didn't have a park nearby, you can still simulate that whole contact with nature, and the fact that we're going to go sit, like kind of picnic, like put a blanket up on the lawn and we're going
Yeah.
to sit. And it was this little kind of rolling thing on the inside of the building. It was a
How
brilliant.
did they do that? What
It
did they
was
use?
brilliant. They created actual grass. What they did was, they kind of built this little hill slide piece that then matched up to a sidewalk. Then they had a garden, I think, on the other side, like a water garden type piece. So they had this walkway through the middle of it. So you can imagine the floor of a building, and instead there was like no chairs or anything like that. One half of it, or one kind of side of it, was this grass area with the windows, so that you, therefore, the grass could grow and all those
Okay.
aspects of it.
Okay.
And then
Yes.
this walkway in the middle, and then the other side had a water element, if I remember correctly. So it was like a little, whatchamacallit, like a pond type thing.
Okay. Yeah.
So you had the water element, you had different plants, and then you had the grass. And so people could sit, and it wasn't just flat grass, but because
Okay.
it had this sort of
A
small
little bit of
hill,
texture. Okay.
little texture, people could feel like they could like walk up to the top, sit there on the grass,
Mhm.
and even have a meeting and such. But you feel like, yeah, you're not outdoors, so you don't have to worry about grabbing your coat. You don't have to worry about
Mhm.
environmental
Mhm.
factors like that. Like if it gets cold outside, you're still within a certain temperature control. You can bring your computers because you don't have to worry about rain or anything like that. But
Yeah.
at least it was different than sitting at my desk or sitting in a conference room to have a conversation,
Yes.
whether you're having a break or whether you're having a meeting. And I thought this was brilliant. And it's amazing. Like, why wouldn't other companies do things like that? Or another company that I saw, back when I was working on biophilic design elements, that had a fountain in the middle of the room, because water is one of the sounds that one of the natural sounds that naturally drowns out everything else. In other words,
Mhm.
it kind
Mhm.
of resets you, it focuses you in, and it's the one that gives you the most amount of calm. Like, it's been studied that running water is the most calming of all the sounds, kind of like bird sounds as well, but
Mhm. Mhm.
water sounds is the most.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so just having a water element, like a running fountain in the middle of the office space, with cubicles around it, and then the offices already, and piping that sound into a system, would
Mhm.
already naturally create a more harmonious environment. And I think that that's the other element of this type of thing, which I was going to ask you about. Like you had said, the mural was a lotus. How much do you bring for yourself, and or for your clients? Do you bring plants into, kind of, not just the, let me put plants in the space, but into the ideation phase? How much do you work with plants in that way?
That's naturally in my artistic DNA. Like my first painting professor is like, "You like organic forms," and I'm like, "Yeah, I just the shape of a fiddlehead, a swirl, a
Mhm.
helix is just it's how my body moves. It's what I want to be doing, and I'm so in love with plants. Like I've gardened my Philadelphia row home with no yard to the limits of what's physically possible. Like
I
every
understand.
strain, every ray of sunshine that accesses this space, I have got a plant in it, and I sit and I look at them, and I
Right.
just I like on a large scale, on a small scale, and The shapes, it's just what I do. So if someone likes my aesthetic, that's what they're getting. They're getting organic form, and it manifests in all kinds of ways. And it's also about the hues. It's about how light behaves and what kinds of colors work with the natural light. You talked about the biophilic with the dappling. I spent a decade literally painting that. Literally painting shadows and how light moves and how it glows and all of that, the affect that it has. And when I talk about the affect, it's the emotional response
Mm-hmm.
to a vision. So I'm, whenever I'm in a space with a person, like that's my aesthetic sensibility and it's how I've trained and grown. So I'm just naturally going to observe those elements and I'm going to amplify them to the greatest degree of what feels good to my client, because again, it's for them. It is not for me. And so I will often do designs that my client loves and I'm just like, it's not what I would choose. But that's great. That's fine. We're all different.
Right.
But I am using all of that training and personal aesthetic preference. If they hire me, they're getting all of that. So they're going to get as much of that as they as they can welcome.
Stephanie, let's just take one quick second so I can share with everyone one of our eco-conscious business partners. The first time I connected with a plant and actually received a response, I got chills. It's such an invigorating sensation when you make a breakthrough like that and realize just how connected we are and that we are nature. As a nature inspired mentor myself, I was super excited to stumble upon the Shift Network and its mission to empower a global network of evolutionary change agents. Talk about my kind of movement. There are so many inspiring thought leaders, healers, empaths, and other visionaries all under one roof, each one on an individual and collective mission to help you reawaken and co create a just and prosperous world. Check out the show notes and click on the link to learn more about the Shift Network. Consider enrolling in a course or two. Their programs are the perfect complement to your evolving naturally conscious life. Absolutely. And it's interesting because I think for so many of us, there's those of us that are very close to plants, we recognize, and it takes a while, and I'm looking kind of off to the side a little bit because I'm looking at a specific cactus plant that I have that moves throughout the course of the day. I mean, I'm sure that for somebody else, they wouldn't notice it,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah.
I sit here and I spend a lot of time, and I've realized over time, besides the relationship with the plant and seeing everything that changes in the nuances and how the light touches the plant differently
Mhm.
throughout the course of the day, but also how much that changes me. Like there's
Mm.
a nonverbal conversation happening that I think we translate as things like it relaxes me or it does this or it does that. Where if I was talking about a friend, like a human friend, I would say, oh, she and I talk about this, this, and this. And then afterwards, it's the same thing that's happening. This plant
Mhm.
and I are having conversations
Yes.
all day. That
Mhm.
observation is not one directional. And I
Right.
think that we think it's one directional because we've been taught not to listen.
Mhm.
But the more you spend time, the more you realize that there is a two-way conversation that's happening.
Mhm.
There is a regulation of both of our bodies that's
Mhm.
happening. In order for me to enter into this conversation, my body needs to reach certain things that we, in a human term, would say calm, tranquil, peaceful, open, like all these other things. But all of that is not because I came here to the conversation with that. It's
Mhm.
sitting here in my frantic, I'm trying to get 17,000 things done at the same
Mhm.
time. The light just shifted, which then draws my attention to this plant. And so, therefore, and then the plant says, oh, you want to have a conversation with me? We need to first change some stuff because this isn't going to happen with the state that you're currently in. And
Mhm.
then, in that, those very quick seconds of breath, of observation, my body starts to like shift into what we call nervous system regulation, what we think of as a more tranquil state, what we think of as awe and wonder, all these different elements that we're now studying, but that this is what happens. And then all of a sudden, there's a moment where my body just goes, ah. And then the real conversation starts.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And you know, of course, when you're out of it, it might take you a long time to get there, which is why they say that it takes about 20 minutes of immersion in nature for your cortisol levels to drop.
Mhm.
But when you're in it, as much as, you know, we are, it happens very, very quickly. It's like all the
Mhm.
stress that I just had staring at you for a few minutes, for like a few seconds, all of a sudden, all of that, you
Mhm.
know, just shifts and regulates and moves into different places. And all of a sudden, everything becomes much more possible. And I do, as a person who consciously didn't understand anything about like color theory and shadowing and all that kind of stuff, I've realized how much my mind has grown and expanded because I can now see those shifts.
Yes.
I can
Uh-huh.
see all of like how the light slowly, even as we're talking right now, I can see
Mhm.
the light
Mhm.
changing in my room, and I can feel how the day is progressing in my body, and I feel
Mhm.
all of those connections. So having somebody who understands that design your space when you are not there yet, you
Mhm.
know, I think it's
Yeah.
like a boost. It's like, let me just give you a kickstart into the
Yes.
person and the human being that you can really be when all of this comes together for you.
Yes, thank you. Because I've had clients tell me that exact thing. That's, I mean, like, it was a low point when I had to leave the art world. I felt like I had failed and that I had like wasted 20 years of my life. And I spent those 20 years paying attention to those things, like sitting in a room, watching the light move, noticing the patterns, the shapes, and figuring out how to really reproduce that in a way that it felt real, that it's not a depiction, that it's actually giving you that affect.
Mhm.
And that felt like such a ridiculous waste of time in terms of capitalism. It's like, I have no resume. It's like,
You just
I,
draw one. Just paint a
yeah,
picture and be like, here's my resume.
yeah. Yeah. So to realize that I had been developing skills that people needed
Mhm.
was a revelation. And it gave me back to myself in certain ways when I was able to take clients by the hand and lead them through this process that I had been spending the last 20, 25 years learning. And I could be, and to realize that I could point out things that they were already perceiving on some level or then could recognize when I pointed them out.
Right.
That it wasn't just me like being in la la land for 20 years, that I was perceiving something real that could benefit people and that I could take them by the hand and lead them through that process. And then they would experience um, a, an enlarged, enriched life after I was done. I mean, I had a client, she texts me every weekend. She's in Edinburgh and she's like, you know, people need this so much. You're going to help so many people. And I'm like, really? You know what we did? Just, it just seemed fun to me. And she's like, it changed my life. And I said, really? And she said, yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so subtle, like, that's the thing about it, it's so subtle. Living here in Damanhur, we live in our what we call nucleos, our shared households, and I remember, you know, I've lived in multiple of these, and
Mhm.
each one of them, it's been interesting to me because I see it from the perspective of, so premise was that a lot of the houses that we have, we originally bought when, you know, the community didn't have a lot of money. We haven't had a lot. We work a lot in the temple spaces and on like things that are happening outdoors. And so kind of the inside has been a little bit neglected. It's been more functional than, you know, anything else. And I remember in one of the houses when I moved there, I started to make these little changes to make the space kind of, like you said, functional, but yet functional with more. And it was amazing to see, especially I was able to change the furniture and the way that we had set up one of our group spaces, one of like our kind of, it's not really a living room, it's more like a big family room that we had. And it was amazing to see the quality of our meetings, how they changed
Mm.
when I changed, some basic elements, with the knowledge that at the time that I had. I mean, had I done that today, I would add even more to it. But like, for example, just modifying the couches, creating a more uniform look, making them in a way comfortable with certain elements, knowing that we would be sitting there for 2, sometimes 3 hours during, our weekly family meeting, the elements all the way around us. And it's interesting because we have a person in the house that is an amazing artist. She's really beautiful, but she's way more about like how something looks rather than what it does for you. And she makes beautiful things, which luckily where she focuses most of her work is amazing and perfect because she makes clothing and it's really beautiful. But when she tried to do like interior designish type elements, she doesn't have the depth because she does a completely different kind of artwork, right? And so it was interesting to watch, like, where do we bring that depth in, where do we bring that relationship with other kin in, how does that change? And I got to see it firsthand because in one part of the house is very stark, and it's become a throughway, even though it's a beautiful space with lots of natural light, but everything else about it makes it a throughway that
Mhm.
doesn't get used. The dining room is very functional and it creates a certain amount, but it can't hold space because of the way that it's set up. And then the back room can hold for certain aesthetics like
Mhm.
company, like meetings, like family meetings. And it's just fascinating. It was
Mhm.
fascinating to me now as I've moved on. I have a master's degree in plant social innovation and design. So
Mhm.
more that I got into the design side of it, I was
Yeah.
like, oh, now I get it. Like, I understand why it is. And I watch people who do not recognize that their spaces, it's not about beauty or not beauty. That's one element of it, whatever you define as beauty. But you do, like, I have another friend of mine who's like, his nervous system is out of control. And I just keep looking at his space going, this doesn't help you. It's beautiful, but it doesn't help you.
Yeah.
Like,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
so,
it's about
uh,
connecting the needs where they need to go.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's just, and again, those elements, like you said, of getting to know the person and designing with
Yeah.
that person in mind. Like, if
Yeah.
you're a really nervous person, then you need one thing. And if instead you're
Mhm.
a person that like doesn't have momentum and needs
Mhm.
support, then you need a completely different design. And I
Yes.
think we
Yeah.
don't we don't think about that when you go to IKEA.
Oh, no. No. I mean, and it's in my work, it's way more about designing processes than it's designing end result
Mm,
because it has to be a process. It's an integrative one because to your point of all the things you were saying, all of those skills are different skills. Making a piece of art is very, very different from making a space that has a certain effect on people's nervous systems. And that was one of the things I learned as running an art space, that really understanding how a space is affecting people and how it's affecting how people perceive your art is something that a lot of artists cannot do. I mean, I had this little gallery and so I bring in some artists. They'd be like, oh, I want this wall. And they would take this tiny little subtle piece and they'd put it on the biggest wall with the longest sight line. And I'm like, your piece just disappeared. It might as well be a piece of trash that just flew against that wall. No one's going to see it.
right, exactly.
And then I'd have someone with this huge piece. It's like, oh, this will fit here. And they would jam it in to a wall with no sight line. And I'm like, this is going to give the viewer claustrophobia. Like, they can't see your piece
Right.
because they could only take in their own little tunnel. They're looking at their piece. They're not looking at all of this. And being able to see all of this is a different perceptual skill.
Right. Do you find that there's like, I guess as we start to wrap up, is there a one tip you could, like, somebody who wants to start to, they want to kind of test things out before they give the phone, where they before they call you and be like, can you come over to my house right
Yeah.
now, or can I just do a Zoom call with you and walk you through the whole house? Like, is there like one place or one tip that you would tell them to start with?
I okay. I have several. I'll try to I'll try to like condense it down. First of all, find one thing,
Right.
one object that you just love. One thing. I mean, I like find a thing here. And just focus on that. Notice what the elements are that you really like and create some space around it. Like, we have so much stuff, we have so much clutter, it's all competing for our attention. Physically clear some space and pick an element of this thing. It's like, what do I like about this? How does it make me feel in my body?
Right.
You do that with color, you do that with form. And when you've cleared the space around it, then you can start to see how that element is charging the space around it. And you can start to create like a very small sanctuary that has the vibe that you resonate with. It can be a tabletop, it can be a corner of a room, it can be a single wall or part of a wall. But if you can clear it, first of all, and then bring one element in and start to perceive, how is this affecting me? How it's affecting me in my body, visually, emotionally. What memories does it bring up? What are the aesthetic things about it that I like? Maybe I like the weight of this cup. Maybe I like the form. Maybe I like the color. And let yourself have a conversation like you would have with your cactus.
Right.
Spend some time, and when you can get that very small space set up so that you can be in that space and have that conversation and start to feel what it's like when a space is resonating with you enough that it can bring you into yourself, then you can just start to expand that outward.
Mm,
It's like a crystal. It's
I like
creating its form, and then you can grow.
I like that. I like that so much. I especially like it because I think what you said that I really enjoyed was it's not even just about the object, it's about learning what are the elements of that object that end up giving you different sensations. Like, and it's funny because you chose a tea, the your teacup, or your mug. And for me, like, I have different ones for different types of tea because I'm a big tea drinker, and my different types of tea have different types because they're different feelings, they're different sensations that
Yes.
come with it. And I do agree with you that, I mean, I get that some people's mind works better in clutter, but there is still a kind of clutter that is conducive rather than, a clutter that enhances your sort of spaciness or difficulty in type of things. But what I really loved about what you said is that it's more about learning what are the elements of that particular object so that you can then, like, as a fractal, reproduce elements of that in other areas. So is
Mhm.
it the weight? Like, do you have things that need to have kind of a feeling of weightlessness? Because maybe you feel like you're airy, maybe you feel like you're up in the air, and therefore having things that kind of in a way weigh you down. Or is it instead something that's fragile and that needs to kind of give you space to be able to explore? Is it things that need to be a little bit more industrial because maybe you feel more fragile?
Mhm.
Or is it, like, really figuring out which things reflect who you are, or which things are the ones that give you comfort and sense of safety because they maybe provide an element that you're missing. And I think that
Yes.
that's really also an important aspect to work with when you're working with houseplants. I think many people buy houseplants based on what they go to a store and they see and they say, I like that. But I think it's really important. Like, for example, many of my houseplants are succulents. And they're succulents on purpose. It's like started off as a thing. And then I started to look at the trend and I started to understand that I don't actually keep my house that warm. And yet these are all kind of warm climate plants. So that's why they're all near windows. But I realized that it was an element of me that was missing because I'm in the mountains and I'm usually a person from the beach. I come from a tropical environment. There's elements of me that grow like succulents, and therefore I'm replicating this, and therefore my relationship with these plants is very different because it gives me an opportunity. Like, I do have a few much more delicate plants that are growing in other parts of my house, and those are also different relationships. Like a peace lily that's more shade, that needs more water, is in my bedroom. And Key is the first plant I see every single morning. And there's a relationship that's there about that delicate side of myself, that more shaded side of myself, that part of me that needs to find that space to be more private, to be more internal. And therefore that's why Key lives in my bedroom. Key has tried to live in different parts of my house, hasn't worked. Bedroom is the only one near
Yeah,
my
no
bed.
side.
Yeah, and it's really
Uh-huh.
it's interesting, and I think that whether you're talking about your relationship with a plant or whether you're talking about a different kind of element, I do think it's really important for us to give ourselves that space to figure out what it is that helps me with that.
Mhm.
Stephanie, this has been a fantastic fantastic conversation. How do people find you?
Practicalsanctuary.com.
Perfect. And we will definitely include that in the show notes so that
Fantastic.
everybody can find you. And do you only do things local? Do you also do things
I
remote?
I work with people all over the world. I have
Beautiful.
helped people move from Australia to Germany to, from Des Moines to Scotland. I can work remotely with anyone. It's a little different when we're working remotely, but it's the same process.
Exactly. Beautiful. Any last words for everybody?
Thank you for listening. That's all.
I love it.
I've
I
talked
love
enough.
it.
Yes.
I think
It's been
it's
really fun.
I think it's fantastic also because, again, this is the type of thing that we don't even realize exists. I think we think of interior designers as like, oh, I want to make my house all fancy. And it's
Yeah.
like, yes, but not
Okay.
only.
That is the one last thing I want to say.
Yeah.
It does not have to cost a lot of money.
Mm,
That is the thing. You do not have to have a huge budget. We start with what you have where you are now. And I do not encourage you to buy things. I really work with people on reusing, replacing, refinishing, just moving things around, getting rid of things. People do eventually end up buying a few things, but that is not the basis of my business. I do not exist to sell you a pile of things at a markup or to get you to contract someone to build a mountain in your living room.
right, right.
Yeah. It's lovely if you have the budget, but if you don't, it's okay. You can start
Right.
where you are.
I love that. That's the perfect place to end. Thank you so much. And to everybody listening, I hope you have really enjoyed this episode. One day I will figure out why my video jumps from place to place because it still does this. I keep laughing for those who watch the
I
video
wondered
because
about
it
that.
keeps
Yes.
I don't know why. It's this thing that my video likes to
Just
do. Like,
yeah,
let
just
me give
like
you the wide view and then let me bring it back close. But anyways, but thank you so much. And for those of you that are listening, please check out Stephanie's work. Everything that you need is included on the show notes. And again, if you feel like there's something that you need to express in your space and you're not having a chance, please reach out to her. And if there are things in your life in general, your relationship with yourself, with your natural space, with your relationship with other kin that you want to explore, you know that the Naturally Conscious community is the place where we're having all of these conversations. I'd love for you to come and join us there. And if there's anything that I could do to support you on your own journey to better understand yourself and to help you flow with the life that you really want, please reach out to me. All the information you need, again, is in the show notes. So that's it for this episode. Remember to resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. To continue these conversations, join us in the Naturally Conscious community, your premier online ecosystem for plant reawakening and accelerated evolution and co-creation with other kin. Here, you'll find expansive discussions, interactive courses, live events, and supportive group programs like the Plant Wisdom Book Club and the Sprouts Writing and Creativity Group. Connect with like-minded individuals collaborating with plants to integrate these insights into life. Intro and outro music by Steve Shuley and Poinsettia from The Singing Life of Plants. That's it for me, Tigria Gardenia, and my plant collaborators. Until next time, remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. I'm out. Bye.